I was the first person in my family to go to college. Kent State was where I landed. The Vietnam War was televised, unlike current wars, so we were quite aware of some of the horrible things that were happening. The Pentagon Papers and the other information that was becoming available helped me to develop a position against the war in Vietnam. I lived in a dormitory called Johnson Hall, and it was right across the Commons from the ROTC building. ROTC buildings across the country had been targeted for demonstrations because of their connection to the military. Thursday night, the Cambodian incursion spurred the anti-war activity across America and at Kent. I watched from afar near my dorm as a crowd gathered around the ROTC building and attempted to set it on fire. As we were walking along the street, the National Guard began to arrive, and everyone there took off and headed back towards campus. At the time that we got back to the area of my dorm in the ROTC building, it was fully involved in flames. Sunday, when people got up, I lived on campus in the dorm. It was a spring day, and the university had been occupied by 900 Ohio National Guardsmen with helmets and bayonets on their M1 Grands, visiting with students who were walking around and chatting with them. The next day, the Guard had occupied the campus, but there were still classes as usual scheduled. After we went to a class, the noontime, there was a rally scheduled for noon, and the victory bell, which was in the Commons, rang. Myself and 1,000 other people gathered around the victory bell, and across the Commons facing us, protecting, it seemed, the ashes of the burned-out ROTC building, were 150 or so National Guardsmen in full battle gear. Some people chanted anti-war slogans. Sergeant Rice from the campus police said, "Students of Kent State, this is an illegal assembly. Return to your dormitories." After that, the Jeep went back, and then from the line of guardsmen, some 9 or so people advanced with modified grenade launchers that were set to fire tear gas. And they fired tear gas canisters at the crowd. In spite of this activity, it didn't feel like there was a sense of impending disaster. With these tear gas canisters, it became like a bizarre tennis match. After a few minutes of the tear gassing and it not being very effective, the guardsmen moved out and began approaching the students, helmets and fixed bayonets. They made the announcement, "Students of Kent State," over the bullhorn again, "we have you surrounded." A segment of them kneeled down and aimed their rifles over towards the Prentice Hall parking lot, where the most vocal students were. Guardsmen who were kneeling and aiming their rifles stood up and proceeded back the way they had come. Everyone thought it was over. It was like a cheer. It's over. We won. They're going back. It's done. But a small contingent of, say, a dozen, when they got to the corner of the railing in front of Taylor Hall, as if by design, they leveled their rifles in my direction, and being 18 and frustrated, and for the first time that day, when they leveled their guns at me, I responded with a gesture, with my middle finger upraised in my right hand. We held that position for just a second until they began firing. I was convinced that these these guns were not loaded with live ammo, until I saw the ground in front of me churn up, and I realized at that moment that they were live bullets. I was also shot through the middle of my body that sent me sailing through the air and back and landing on my back on the ground. Students gathered around me, and a young woman came to my right, and I squeezed and held her hand. And other students came and tried to help. I felt like I was dying. I could feel my life leaving my body. They loaded us on the ambulance, struggling to stay alive. And the first thing I remember just telling my parents I didn't do anything wrong, to assure them that 2 days or 3 days later in intensive care. After being in the hospital a while, I got home and I read in the local paper the students had overturned cars and attacked guardsmen with bricks and bats. And I thought, oh my God, this isn't true at all. I cried every time for 15 years. And then I realized that by speaking about it, I was sharing the burden of sadness and truth. We were lulled into thinking that really love is all you need. And it seemed like such a deception in some ways, because what you need is political activity. What you need is nonviolent resistance to illegal and unjust government activities. And nothing's ever changed without that.